Today we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics, which is brand research. What is brand research and what do you actually do? And I think a lot of us feel like the mood boarding stage or inspiration stage kind of is like brand research, but you feel like you're not sure what to do besides that. So today I'm going to talk about everything I do for brand research for my clients. As a tiny piece of background, before I became a designer, I got my degree as a researcher. So this is actually something that I have a little bit of extra training in. I really like to use Notion to keep things organized. So I've also created a template that you guys can use. So I'm gonna walk you through that one today, and then I'll also link it down in the description so you can go and copy it and grab it and use it yourself. So what is brand research? Brand research to me is a way to gather a lot of information in a very structured way that will help you answer specific questions about the brand and about the market as a whole, that will help you build a more effective brand that is more valuable to your clients. So rather than just creating something that is really pretty, you're creating something that is truly valuable to your clients. And that means you can charge more, you'll have happier clients, and a lot more return work and referrals. I see brand strategy as being made up of a couple different parts. One of them definitely is the visual aspect, things like trends, what the competitive market looks like, and things that the customers already really love that you want to be aware of. The second part, which I think is the one that a lot of people find very difficult to approach, is things like demographics, purchasing trends, and a lot more information in terms of what is actually important to this customer, how do they make purchasing decisions, and what you need to be aware of in terms of how big their budget is and how competitors are trying to actually approach these people. So we're going to go step by step, and the first thing we're going to do is to jump into the Notion template so I can show you a little bit of an overview. Okay, so we're starting off in the brand strategy template document in Notion, and as I mentioned, you can always go and just grab that from the description. Here we first have a look at the 3 steps. The very first step is client discovery, because your client has so much information that they're sitting on. They know a ton about their customers, their products, their competitors, and they also have a vision for their business. And I'll go more into each of these 3 steps, but first I'll just show you what the 3 ones are. The second one is desktop research, and here we're really trying to understand the landscape and gather clear and quantifiable data. So basically anything that can inform the brand, and I'll go into details for this as well. And then step 3 is to summarize and make conclusions. What I'm talking about here is not to cherry pick data, meaning you're not just like picking out certain things and leaving out lots of other useful information. It's just about taking this heap of information that you found and seeing, okay, this is relevant to this company, this is relevant to the brand, and this is actually not that relevant. Okay, so those are the 3 steps. So let's start with client discovery. So I like to use a tool called HolaBrief for the discovery stage, and it's because I used to do this way more complicated with presentations and designs, and actually you just really want something that's visually and clear for your client. I also have a video on HolaBrief, so if you guys want to find out exactly my workflow in HolaBrief, I'll link that up here. So HolaBrief is a tool that lets you create briefs, as you can hear in the name, together with your clients, and that's to make sure you have all the information before you actually start designing. They have a ton of different exercises that you can add that will make it easy for you to create your own workflow. You can use their templates or create sections or exercises from scratch. Their templates are super versatile, and I just really love using their app. So let's say, for example, that you are selling frozen yogurt. You'll want to find out, when do people want to buy frozen yogurt? Why do they want to buy frozen yogurt? Let's say they want an alternative to ice cream. Maybe that means that their perception of frozen yogurt is that it's healthier somehow. And so we want to find these things out. And then we'll want to put that down as a sort of assumption, because at this stage, when we're working with the client on discovery, everything so far is probably an assumption or, a well-educated guess from your client based on their experience, but we haven't actually validated anything through surveys or data or anything like that. So at this stage, we're just trying to get information from what your client's perception of these questions are. I've put all the different questions that I like to include sections for in my Notion template, so you can go and read all of those questions in more detail there. So the next section of this video, which is where most of the meat is, and that is the desktop research. And so this is where we really get into a lot of those questions that I think a lot of you are thinking about when it comes to doing this research. So I like to split the research into these two sections. So we have visual and style research and target audience research. So one is something that you're probably quite familiar with, looking at direct competitors. What does their brand look like? Who are they? What messaging and tone of voice choices are they making? We're also looking at indirect competitors, like what niches might they have missed? What are they doing right that the brand that you're designing for could learn from? And we're also looking for trends for the same audience. So let's say, for example, that you are designing a brand for let's say a gym. And so in that case, you might want to look at things like nutrition bars and exercise equipment and maybe even, podcasts for people who are working out. And you might want to see what they're doing to attract that audience, because it's going to be the same audience. Then we get into one that I find super interesting, and that is trends for the same audience. And that can be things like culture and movements, like is there a movement to have, let's say, a much healthier attitude towards your weight? Maybe there's a psychology aspect, like maybe people are being a lot more stressed when they're working from home, or if you're designing a brand that is, let's say, a digital collaboration tool, you might want to talk about how work has changed or take that into consideration. And then I think it's also really good to look at recent rebrands. This is something that I think is super informative, because obviously those recent rebrands, especially if they had a little bit of a budget, have done tons of market research to find out that rebrand is going to be effective. Next up, we're going into demographics. And this is really going to be trying to validate a lot of the information that your customer has given you. You can actually start to look at reviews and testimonials and who is buying products from competitors and see if there's a gap there. The next two questions are going to be perhaps the most important questions that you're answering throughout the whole research that you're doing. The first one is, what is the core problem that someone is trying to solve for? And the second one is, what is the solution and how can we try to pitch that in a way that is going to be addressing that problem? Now, your client will likely have told you a version of this, but try to kind of put that aside and think about it just from like a logical human perspective. We were talking to a great brand strategist the other day, and he mentioned the Swiffer product. Here, the problem was that people were really tired. They were, sweeping things, and everything was getting stuck in corners. They had to continuously go and maybe take a wipe and get that last bit of stuff that you can't get. So they wanted something that was like a magnet for the dust. So this magnet for dust was kind of the core selling point that the strategy was focused around. The next two things that you can do, but you don't have to do, is to conduct surveys and to do focus groups. Now, I personally have never done any big focus groups. I have done kind of like one-to-one meetings with 10 to 20 people, and we sort of like ask them specific questions or ask them to do very specific tasks. This type of research can be really good if you're creating a brand for something that is really new or really different, and you're trying to gauge people's understanding of what it does. It doesn't have to be a huge number of people for it to be informative. And the great thing about these tools is that you can actually do a lot of very specified groups of people. So very similar to like Facebook targeting, you can choose like education level, income level, job titles, age, location, things like that. So because you're able to put in all this demographic data, you'll know that you're talking to the right person. And that will make it really effective when you're presenting all these findings to your client. This next section is one of my favorite because I get asked this all the time. And that is like, where do you actually find the information? And for me, I do it in a couple ways. When I look for things like branding, design choices, messaging choices, I tend to look at company websites. There's so much out there because you'll see how they have put their best foot forward to try to answer the brief. And so look at different company websites, and I'll just find those through things like Google, or looking at social media and looking at direct competitors there. The next one is inspiration sites. So this is probably where you're already at. And that's things like Pinterest, Design Inspiration, Dribbble. They're great for spotting visual trends, looking at inspiration, looking at similar brands. And here you'll get a lot of examples that you can use for mood boards or stylescapes. as well as your research trend report. The next one is, or actually the next two are kind of my favorite because I think people overlook them all the time, and that is government reports and trend reports. Governments put out a ton of reports. Either places that are business driven because they want to support businesses and help them make smart choices. So you can look at places like, if you're in the UK, you can look at Business Gateway, and they have a ton of free reports where you can actually find out a lot about different specific industries. And they're all for free. They're usually quite concise. They have a ton of specific data that you can use. And here you just want to go through and look at, okay, for the questions that I'm trying to answer and the audience that you are targeting, which of these pieces of information will be useful and which are the most interesting to the client that I'm helping. So similarly for trend reports, places like HubSpot or Statista, they put out reports all the time, and it can be on how people use social media to buy things, or generally where people tend to buy, how they behave, and what they value. The last place is social media, which I kind of already mentioned, but I like to use it for messaging and language because people are, or they tend to be quite honest on social media. And so if you go to competitor social media accounts and you see people's comments either saying, oh, I love this product because, or I hate this product because, that's usually a good way to figure out what people really are looking for and the things that bother them about competitors. And then you can bring that up as an opportunity for your clients to fix that pain point and address those things. So let's say, for example, that you are working for a gardening company and people are saying that the products that they have are non-toxic, and they really appreciate that. Then you can say, okay, the client I'm working for are also using non-toxic product. Let's lift that forward in the brand as one of the core things that we are actually using in our messaging. And so when you work with any company, they probably have like 50 features of their offer, right? And so your job with this strategy is to figure out which ones do I want to lift forward. So now we're on to the last part, which is the summary and conclusion. And this is when we're trying to look over everything we found, and we're going to try to put this together in a very comprehensive report for our client. If you guys are curious to see that report template, and maybe for me to make a template that you guys could grab, let me know and I can make another video about that in the future. This report I suggest to make it as easy as possible, and there's a couple things to think about here. One, if you have a lot of information, you need it to be clear. Your client is never going to just read like a 30-page document. When we create reports, sometimes they're usually between 15 and 35 pages, but there's a lot of graphs, there's a lot of infographics, clear hierarchy of information, just to make sure that it's easy for them to take in the core highlights of things. The second one is to state your sources, because your client might want to refer back to a government report that you found, or a research paper, or a website for a competitor. And so make sure that you're making it super easy for them to find what your source was. I like to do this two ways. The first one is I sometimes just link the actual words or a little section of what I'm talking about if I'm creating an interactive PDF, let's say in Adobe InDesign. And then I also like to put a sources section at the very end. The last thing that's good to think about is don't just send your client this report. You put so much work and time and effort into making this. You need to present it and help them see everything that you've done, and again, connect the dots in different ways. And then once you've actually presented everything, then you can send them a report as a backup, as a way for them to have everything in one place and refer back to. I really hope that you feel more confident doing brand research, and that it can become a way for you to build your business and maybe expand your toolkit a little bit. Thank you so much for watching, and super good luck with your project. See you next time.